Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for coming to the med school panel. We're really excited to talk about everything. We're also going to be recording this, so if you have friends that can't go, you can let them know that I have a recording out, and then I'll send that out in the Discord, and you guys can message me if you want that recording. First, we're going to start off by having all of the panelists introduce themselves. And yeah, so if any of you wants to start, or I could call on people if you want. It's up to you guys. Okay, I'll take that as me calling it someone. Um, let's do Abby. Do you want to start? And then we can popcorn from there.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Abby. I graduated in May of 2020. I'm currently in M2, almost M3 in like a month at the University of Illinois. Um, my specialty interest is pediatrics right now. And I think that's probably it. I'll call on Kayla next.
How did I know you were going to call me? Anyway, I graduated with Abby as well in 2020. My name's Kayla, by the way. And then I am in my M1 year. I'll be going to M2 in about 3-ish months. And then I go to SAU School of Medicine. And I'm thinking about neurosurgery currently, but also ER at the same time. And those are completely different fields. So don't know yet. But
let's see it. I'll go on, Andrew.
Man, how did I know she's gonna call on me? Okay, yeah, my name's Andrew. I'm I'm a yeah, I can't hear you very well, Kayla. You got mic stuff going on. I've got sorry. I'm a 2021 graduate. I graduated with a degree in biology. I'm currently with Kayla. We're both M1s at SIU, and I'm also interested in emergency medicine. But you can't hear me.
No, we heard you. You're good.
Okay, well, Kayla can't hear me now, so sorry. It's a disaster, but yeah, interested in emergency medicine, but I'm open to pretty much anything at this point. So, I will popcorn to who hasn't talked yet. How about Jacob?
Hi, can everybody hear me? Good. Okay. Cool. Hi, I'm Jacob, or Jake. As other people know me. I'm like Abby. I go to U of I, College of Medicine, but in Peoria, and I am a soon-to-be M3, and just finished taking step one. Graduated from SIUE, like most people here. So, yeah, cool. Oh, and interested in like primary care, like maybe family medicine or internal med, peds or something. And I'll popcorn to Mr. Firstenow.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Grant. I also graduated in May of 2020 from SIUE. I go to the University of Louisville School of Medicine. I am interested in primarily peds. I think I want to subspecialize in something peds. But yeah, I think that's everything. I'll pick okay, so I think it's Noah and Hendrik who haven't gone. Noah.
Hey everyone, I'm Noah. I'm currently a senior here at SIUE, but I'll be attending SIU School of Medicine in the fall. I'm not totally sure what I want to do. I'm going to keep an open mind, but I think surgery would be pretty cool. So yeah, I'll call on Hendrik.
Yeah, my name's Hendrik. I'm also a senior at SIUE, and I'll be attending SIU School of Medicine as well. And I'm also pretty open-minded, so we'll see where that goes.
Awesome. Thank you guys. So next we're gonna just have an open panel. You guys can either speak up, like open up your mics, or you can message it in the chat and I can read them out loud, or if you want to private message me, I can also do just put your question out there. So Does anyone have any questions first?
I have a question. So, okay, I know that a lot of people talk about obviously like, oh, med school is like so crazy and it's so difficult. Like they've contemplated like dropping out of it multiple times and like it's so terrible and you have no time for anything. Like obviously that's pretty stereotypical and I'm sure there's some truth to that. But as a pre-med student, I am very curious, like how true is that? Do you severely want to drop out? Like, are you dying?
I'll just
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Joe, you got it.
okay. I went against the rules of everyone saying like don't get an animal. I got a dog, he's a quarantine puppy. I have a life to play with him and take him on walks. It's a completely different study technique, I think is more the difference in my opinion, than the actual material itself. Like it's all doable, it's all there for you. I think it's just learning how to study in a different way from undergrad because it is totally different.
So I'll piggyback off of that. We're just M1s too, so like some of the older people here probably should get some insight. But so far, M1 really hasn't been all that bad. I still do all of like the normal stuff that I used to do. I have time to go to the gym, and test weeks are pretty busy. Like I mean, the week or so before a test, you're cramming, and I mean that's pretty typical. But like Kayla was saying, it's just a little bit different of a technique to studying. Like in undergrad, you could go into a test. Knowing that you know all of the material and are going to get 100, I would be so happy with like a 70. It's a totally different game. So yeah, I don't know. Some of the older students could probably shine some light on what the other years look like, but it's perfectly reasonable as an M1.
Yeah, so I would say, because I'm officially done with like the didactic years, I would say compared to undergrad, I had a way more free time to study. Just because in med school, you don't like, no one's really working, you don't have a job to worry about. You go to class, you do your like extracurricular activities, and then you study. And like at U of I, they give us like 3 half days a week, just completely free, like nothing, no classes or anything, just to study. And I think they probably do something similar at most schools. So I feel like I had way more free time and I didn't know what to do with myself some weeks when it was a little bit of a lighter week. But yeah, it's definitely I studied way more than I did in college, but I had more time, if that makes sense. Just because you don't have a whole bunch of other things going on to distract you as much. But I would say I definitely had to adapt to a different way of studying, and I didn't probably figure that out until halfway through my M1 year. So it's definitely a lot of trial and error because there's so many different resources and everything that you can use. But and once you get in your M1 year, there's so many like student support services and everything that'll help you. They really want you to succeed. They do not want you to drop out. I've never felt like I wanted to drop out or I couldn't do it. So you definitely have a lot of people, you know, supporting you and wanting you to succeed.
Yeah, I think pretty much everything that Abby said is accurate for Louisville as well. I also forgot to mention I'm also an M2. I'm going to be an M3 soon. And so I think throughout M1 and M2, you do have more time to study in a way, but of course there's more information, so you fill it up pretty easily. But like regardless of what school you go to, I'm pretty sure all schools are going to have a lot of support systems and a lot of resources for you if you feel like you're not having enough time. And another thing is that, I mean, everybody who goes to med school understands that it's a big time commitment. And so you're not alone in feeling overwhelmed. And so that also helps. You can always talk to your classmates, see what's working best for them, and kind of brainstorm on ideas that you can make your schedules a little bit more doable. But I think it's definitely a learning curve because it is different than undergrad. But
Awesome, thanks. Someone had a question in the chat, and it was, I know med school can be expensive, but what, if any, financial aid do medical schools typically offer? Are there any fellowships, stipends, assistantships, etc.?
Yeah, I can talk about this. So a lot of schools, if they offer scholarships, they're just going to be need-based. So you can apply for those just by filling out your FAFSA. And they can look at that information and give you scholarships based on that. Some you can apply for. I know at U of I, they sent out a scholarship application for like probably 15 to 20 different scholarships in the late fall of each year, I think. So you have the opportunity to apply for those. Let's see, my boyfriend Jackson, who was just saying hi earlier, he's also going to be an M3 at UW-Madison, and he got a scholarship just from after interviewing, they offered him a scholarship. So there's a lot of different ways you can get one. A lot of them are just a little bit of money, but they do help out a lot. So that's definitely a school specific thing though. You can, ask if you're interviewing or look on their website, and they should have information about those too.
I can follow up on that a little bit. Another thing you might check out, I didn't get a whole lot of like institutional scholarships. And you can try, if you've got multiple acceptances, you can try and kind of leverage those against each other and see if one of them might give you some money, but I didn't have any success with that. What you might try though is like going around to like local banks and hospitals and such. A lot of those, like I've gotten a few $1,000s in aid just from like banks and hospitals and different stuff like that. So it takes a little bit more work, but like, and I guess it's also kind of a drop in the bucket, but like every little bit counts, I guess. So.
We also have
Yeah, and then
go ahead, Jake.
yeah, some of the email, just look out for emails when you're in school. We receive so many from different financial aid, just scholarships available for people to apply to. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
We also have, I don't know how it's going to work with every other medical school, but at SIU at least, we have also research stipends sometimes. We have a program here over the summer. It's called like MPE. I'm sure it's called something different in every school, but you get, I think it's $2,000. You get 8 weeks. It's 8 weeks over the summer, and you do research. So there's research-based scholarships as well. And sometimes you can kind of work under faculty and staff, and they might get a stipend, and they may kind of pay your part that you contribute to the lab. So research is out there too, if that's something you're interested in.
Also, I wanted to talk about, like, you guys know what SI is, right? Yeah, most of you do. So I basically have that job at med school now. So I applied for it starting my M2 year, and it's like we have a bunch, I think we had like 10 peer educators is what they're called. And so like once a week, every like few weeks or so, like I'll have like a review session, and it's like they pay a decent amount and I get to review material, which was nice for STEP. So, and I know there's multiple positions, like you can be a library aide and like sit in the library and do your homework and get paid, or study and get paid. So I would keep, if you're interested in something like that, there's usually, some sort of job that's like kind of a job, but you also get to study at the same time, and you get paid a little bit for that too. So keep an eye out for that.
We
Just
also had
behind you,
an,
Grant.
oh, anyway, we had another question in the chat. The question was, how do summers work? Does schooling continue, or is summer just shortened? And, just that general question.
I think we had 8, or I don't know how many weeks we had off. It seemed like a lot for the summer, like 6 to 8 weeks, I think. But you should expect a summer break following your first year of medical school. Then after that, it's pretty much, you don't have a break, but you get mini breaks in between, like holidays, and I think we get a fall break during our 3rd year when we start going into the hospital and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard across schools, is that for first year, after your first year, you get a number of weeks off in the summer. I think we got also something like 8 weeks. It's kind of like a normal summer break for college. We did start back a little bit earlier. Like I think we started back like the 30th of July or something like that. But then after that, you pretty much, after second year, you move almost straight into third year. You might get like a few weeks off depending on when you take step. But then you start real quick and then no more breaks after that. But
I just dropped it in the chat too. That our schedule, we actually have like a 4-year schedule. You can kind of just look up online. I mean, it changes a little bit year to year because it's the dates that'll change. But yeah, we have, our school does, technically you can remediate if you do bad in certain parts of the curriculum, and they do that over the summer. So technically you might not have a summer break if you have to remediate, and we do it that way. But we start earlier than undergrad and we end after undergrad as well. So it's kind of a double whammy. It's extra long on both sides. I think we started August 13th was orientation week, and we don't get done until June 3rd. So yeah, a little bit longer than regular undergrad.
Cool, thanks. We had another question in the chat, which was, how do you prevent burnouts? And this is probably a question for also like the seniors in here. So any tips on that?
I'd
I would
say
say, oh, you can
find
go,
time
Jake.
for what you like to do. Oh, just find time for what you enjoy doing, whether that's, going outside for a walk, taking 2 hours to go work out and have a good lunch somewhere, hang out with friends. You need to schedule some self-care time in, especially during, like, for me, it was like during studying for our exam. Study for a little bit and then take a break. It's your job to be a student when you're in a medical school, but we can't help others if we don't help ourselves first. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, just don't make studying your life. No one can study, 10, 12 hours a day. It's not going to be beneficial for you. So just make sure you have breaks in between, or you plan fun things to go see your friends or your family, just to make sure you keep that mental health up and keep yourself first over everything. I think that's the most important.
Yeah, and kind of like how we were alluding to earlier, it's really weird because you're not having that overwhelming class schedule. You're having more time to study, which is a weird thing to kind of adjust to because you're so used to having like class all day, and then you can kind of just quickly study for a test. Meanwhile, I don't know how other colleges do it, but we have 5 tests through the whole first year. So we have a mid-unit, end unit, mid-unit, end unit, and then just an end unit for our last set of organ systems. So you have a lot of time kind of at the beginning because it starts off slow every trimester for us. So you have a lot of free time at the front end that you can kind of reset your clock of you just took a really big final and you were struggling and studying every day. And there's a lot of hiking places here in Carbondale. Garden of the Gods is only like an hour away from here, so we go hiking frequently. There's where we live, there's a sand volleyball court. We play sand volleyball every Thursday at like a set time. So there's definitely times where you can work in, and the more friends you make that are active too, you can always go do that. So
I'll say another part of not burning out is maybe finding a way to study that isn't like totally miserable for you. Like there's all kinds of, there's so many different ways to approach the material. And I think so much of the difficulty is like making structure for yourself and like kind of evenly spacing things out and learning in a way that works for you. So it took a little bit to kind of find like what worked best for me, but it's much less overwhelming when you finally figure it out. So.
Okay, we had another question that was, I have heard a lot of med schools are pass fail. Are your guys' school this way as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's awesome. It's so cool. We like pass fail. And I think there's a lot of it too. It makes things less like competitive and cutthroat because like it does. I mean, I don't. I want Kayla to do as well as she can on the exam. It's not like there's like a curve or anything that I'm like fighting. So you end up helping each other out a lot more. And I think that pass fail is like in general a nice thing.
We also, Andrew can speak to this for our final that we just had. It also goes off the average. So how SIUE does it, if you get a 75%, you're good, you pass, you're good. But say the class average is only like a 60% on the test, a 60% is then going to be a pass. And then one standard deviation below that is also going to be a pass. So for example, our biochem section on our last final, the average was a 51%. So you could get anywhere from like a 43% up and still pass. So it also depends on how hard they write the questions. Pass fail's great.
Yeah, it's very similar at U of I. To pass, I think you have to get at least a 67. Like if you get a 67 and up, you pass. But depending on how hard the exam is, they can lower that. So it's never going to be higher than a 67, but most of the time it goes lower because the exams are hard. But yeah, it's nice. And especially since they changed step 1 to pass fail, just takes a lot less stress or a lot more stress off of you.
Yeah, we're also pass fail. It is a pretty hard cutoff at 70. But there is some like, I guess, curving, you could call it, that goes on if class averages are lower than what they expected it. But having it be pass fail is nice as far as it's not as much pressure as like getting a letter grade. Since that's kind of like not the point. The point is just to absorb as much material as you can and get it ready for clinical years. So it takes some pressure off having it be pass fail.
All right, the next question was the MCAT harder than you expected?
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty hard. But if you put in the work, it's very manageable. You just have to start early and don't lose sight of the goal, and you'll be just fine. And I'm sure everyone else could shed a lot of knowledge on the MCAT as well.
I think I might be the only person that took it twice in the panel, I think. But I did take it twice. The first one definitely defeated me. Don't feel defeated. If your goal is to become a doctor, you can do it. I promise. A bad grade on a first one isn't going to like completely kick you out because I'm here. So, but yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So take it like day by day, kind of make a schedule way before you're even going to start studying, just so you know, like, okay, this day I need to do glycolysis and gluconeogenesis, and then, kind of separate it so it makes logical sense and you can kind of build off of that stuff. But yeah, take it really slow. Again, marathon, not a sprint. And it's okay if you don't do great the first time because it'll all work out.
I personally like it was about, I mean, it's every bit as hard as you hear it is, but at the same time, you'll walk out and feel like you did awful, and then you'll get your score back, and usually it's like somewhat a relief. I would say, like, as far as like a tip for studying, if you can, like, I think for me it was helpful like to break a concept down and like explain it to yourself. And by doing that, you kind of figure out what you don't fully understand. And you do that enough times, you eventually learn all that you need to know about it. So I found that to be really helpful, just as like a general study habit.
I also think it's really nice to find someone in the grade above you who just took it. So like when I was a junior, I started studying, and I talked to Andrew about what he did for his study plan. And I thought it was super important to, get his insight and then study similar to what he did. And it just kind of gives you a plan to go into, because it can be hard to see all this information and think, how am I going to study for this? Having someone else who just did it explain it to you was super helpful.
would you mind sharing some insight on how to actually go about studying?
I feel like the first step is realizing what kind of studier you are. So I know some people did like MCAT like classes where they were either online or in person with like an instructor teaching them. I am a very like solitary studier, so I just bought I think like the Kaplan MCAT books, and I would just go through those on my own. But that doesn't work for everyone. So figure out whether you like, you know, you can sit there and read a book for 5 hours, or you need like interaction with other people or an instructor, or you need something more like videos. I think that's a good first step in kind of figuring out what is the best way for you to study and what you're going to be most productive in. And then just going on from there.
Kind of on the other side of that, I did not like the Kaplan or the Princeton books. They just weren't my fave. I did it for the first MCAT, and I just didn't like how the material questions of those books didn't really match the questions that you get on the MCAT. I kind of didn't like that differentiation. I suggest, in my own personal opinion, is there's like this giant AAMC package that you can get. It comes with 7 full-length tests. It comes with like hundreds of thousands of flashcards, I'm pretty sure, in every section. And that's written by the people who write the test. So you're actually getting questions in a style of which you're going to be presented to on the MCAT. And I think that's just the first half step, is learning how to take the test. It's not even about the content. A lot of the times it's about, because sometimes you just need to know how to read a question because the answer is in there and you don't have to have any background knowledge on anything and you can answer it. So it's a figuring out which ones you like, but I personally like the AAMC just because it's written in the same tone as the MCAT.
Yeah, and I can jump back onto that too. I think just in general, like repetition is the most important thing that you can do. And for me, at least, it was seeing things over and over and over again, and you kind of start to see like a pattern. On top of the AAMC stuff, like Kayla was saying, is like gold. Like that's probably the best you're gonna find. UWorld it costs a lot of money, but that was also excellent. And the explanations that they provide after their answers are super helpful for figuring out where you went wrong. And then just like another piece of advice, there's like a million different like resources that you could use to study. Like, and there's so many different things and it's overwhelming. So I think it's important to just like pick one and stick with it. Like, a lot of people fall into the trap of like, oh, this is better than this is better than that, and you just like kind of spin your wheels. But if you pick one and stick with it, I think you'll find success.
It's also really nice to plan out studying like weeks to, you know, a couple months in advance. Like Andrew saying, UWorld was a really nice resource. I felt that their questions, to me, honestly, were like even harder than what was actually on the MCAT. And so you test yourself with these really difficult questions and then know the material to that par, and then you'll end up knowing it really well for the actual test as well. But there's hundreds of questions on there. So, you know, weeks in advance, I'd say, okay, I'm going to do like 10 questions a day for the next 5 weeks. So just setting up a goal like that, like a daily goal, will definitely keep you from doing things like procrastinating. Just anything like that is really helpful.
Cool. Okay.
So-
Oh, sorry. Were you gonna
Oh,
talk?
I was just gonna add one more thing. Just recognize what topics you feel more strong with. Just sorry, Jackson just spilled his water everywhere. So like, for example, I had Norcio for biochem, who was like crazy hard, but he was really good. So I felt really like strong in that subject. So when I was planning out my studying like plan, I didn't really leave much time for that just because I feel like I was pretty comfortable with that. But like orgo, I hated, which you don't even do in medical school, by the way. But I hated orgo. So I had to like plan a lot of extra time just for that. So definitely look at what, you know, topics you're more comfortable with and kind of customize your study plan to the how that works out.
Also, one thing for when you future get there, as much as you want to avoid your MCAT, don't do it. Don't do it. Just don't. Unless you know deep, deep in your heart that you absolutely didn't know a single question, which you're going to feel like that anyway, but don't void the test, because the sections I was like, I nailed that section. That was my worst section. And then the section where I was like, that was awful was my best section. So I feel like everyone walks out just not knowing what even happened. You don't even remember a single question after you get out of the test. So don't freak out about it. Everyone feels that way. I don't think it's
Long 4 weeks.
Cool. And yeah, Andrew, I can send out like all of your guys' emails if you're comfortable with that. So if anyone has questions about the MCAT and other things, they can email you. I've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'm just going to try and go in order. What type of resources do your institutions offer for med school students?
So for just starting out with medical school, we were offered Osmosis, which is a education platform for medical school. Basically, educational videos that are kind of more illustration based. I really use those quite a bit to supplement, or basically more often instead of the curriculum that our school would give us. I just watched some videos and read up on it, and felt prepared for classes and taking exams. And then we get UWorld for when we take the step 1 exam. We get UWorld for given to us by the school.
I think you had a really good point there too that I'll jump off of. So much, and I don't know how it varies school to school, but we have a lot of like freedom in how like we study. There's like the majority of things are optional to go to. There are some things that are required and usually they're helpful, but you'll find very quickly whether or not you prefer to use other things or go to their lectures. And I think that oftentimes like it's more time efficient to go and just like find something that works better for you, because like the quality of lectures can vary so much. But with that being said, that he was saying Osmosis is pretty common. They gave us Boards and Beyond, which is like for STEP what like I would say the majority of people use. And then I think next year they give us like Sketchy, like the Sketchy package, which is like cartoons for learning pharmacology, micro and stuff. So they give you pretty much anything that you would realistically need to use. And if not, you could probably justify like whatever is an educational expense.
I'll add on just, we have a lot of the same resources, but one thing I don't know if the rest of you guys have used is we have a class Google Drive that has a lot of different materials that everybody shares in it. And it has like a lot of the different resources that people have bought and then put on there. And so we got that shared with us at the very beginning. It has a ton of textbooks on it too. It's like multiple gigabytes of information. But it has like Sketchy and stuff like that on there too. So that's been nice. Some schools might do that, some might not, but that's also another thing.
We also have, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Anki. Our class prior to and every class before us, they make an entire Anki deck for every single class and every single resource session we have the entire year. So basically you have a whole Anki deck of all of the material for the entire year that you can go off of. So that's really helpful. I mean, sometimes the lectures change from year to year and you kind of have to edit them a little bit, but we got like, I think 40,000 cards or something like crazy for our class. So that's really nice too, that some schools have.
And that's like I would say that's like my primary like vessel for learning. And I would say that it's a pretty 50-50 split for people who love it or hate it. But if you think you might be interested in using it, that's like one of the few things that is probably worth your time before you get into medical school to kind of get a grip on. I would not pre-study for anything ever, like use your time doing literally anything else. But learning how to set up and use Anki is like probably a good use of your time, just because I think it's an excellent learning tool.
Yeah, my only advice is don't buy anything unless like to start off, because most likely your class above you has made that Google Drive and you can get a lot of those subscriptions that are like $300+ for free. So don't buy anything unless you're sure that it's
Yeah.
not, you can't get it, you know, from one of your friends or from one of your classmates.
Yeah, I don't think I've bought anything for medical school. Like, I don't want to have more debt, to be honest. So.
Okay, cool. Next question was, did anyone take any gap years? If so, how many years and what did you do during those times? And if you didn't take a gap year, if you know anyone who has, maybe you could speak on that.
I think that's just me. But so I did take a gap year. I took one. There's a program at SLU that I did. It's called the MAP program. It's helped a little bit. It's most of the 1 year like gap year programs are just certificates, not actually degrees. So that can kind of hurt or help you depending on what your like financial situation is. But I also worked as a medical assistant at a dermatology clinic in over on the Missouri side. And that was probably single-handedly the best part of my gap year, just because at my place that I worked, we were medical assistants. So we actually scrubbed in on surgeries. We did like biopsies, everything like that. And getting to medical school, like in the anatomy cadaver lab, I've noticed just the lack of just knowing how to like hold instruments or use instruments. And I think that was just kind of an extra clinical thing that I got. At SIU, we do doctoring like our first year. We do like fake clinical, it's standardized patients that act. So you have to go through and do the whole process of what you would actually do as a physician, you know, later down the line. And I think that clinical experience also helped me. Scribing, I'm sure everyone's going to tell you scribing is a great idea just to get you with the terminology. But yeah, I think getting that actual hands-on clinical experience is really helpful because you don't realize how much you take in knowledge-wise that your peers don't have. Like first day cadaver lab, since I had scrubbed on surgery, I know how to put a scalpel blade on the scalpel holder. And like everyone was struggling with that. And it just didn't click in my head like, oh my gosh, no one knows how to do that because they were all scribes and you don't do anything, you know, clinical wise. So I think getting some clinical experience is really helpful. Missouri does have less laws on who can be a medical assistant than Illinois. So you might want to look on the Missouri side in St. Louis and the bigger hospitals.
So I didn't take one, but one of my best friends did. And she just worked as a bartender for that year and made a lot of money to help out for medical school. Because realistically, by the time you're like starting your gap year, you're kind of almost finishing your application for the next year. If you're like starting in the summer. So she was like, well, I'm not gonna, you know, try to get up clinical experience when I'm, you know, already submitting my application for the next year. She's like, I'd rather just have fun, relax for a year before my life gets crazy and make some money. So that's another way to think of it too as well.
Cool, thanks. Someone else had a question that was, can you talk about the difference between MD and DO? If anyone knows.
Do we have any DO people in here?
I wasn't sure, but
I don't know that we do. I think, I mean, from what I understand, the curriculum is pretty much like the same, with the exception that DOs do like osteopathic, like manipulation, like they do some like extra stuff that we don't do. In regards to, like, at the end of the day, both of them are going to make you a physician. So I don't know. There's differences in like prestige and stuff, but I don't know that I would let that dictate my decision.
The only thing I really know about DO is if you're thinking about going into a very, very competitive specialty like plastic surgery, anesthesiology, any of that, I think DOs have a less likelihood of getting into those programs in comparison to MD students. I know that that's getting less and less now. They're trying to adjust that, but I still think it's technically there statistically wise. So it just kind of depends. Like if you know you're just going to be a family med doctor or an ER doc, you know, and the DO school is cheaper, go that route for sure if that's what you're hard set on. But if you're thinking about more, I know it's like the more prestigious specialties that have longer times that they normally, MD has the upper hand.
Yeah,
I
both.
also think
Go ahead, Abby.
those just have to take a few more like board exams. Like MDs, you just take your
Mhm.
3-step exams, but DOs, they have to take the step exams and they have to take, I think they're called like COMLEX or something as well. So it's just
Mhm.
more exams, if that's like an issue.
Yeah, as far as clinical
Yeah, I
practice,
guess.
there's no
Yeah.
there's no difference.
Oh, no.
DOs and MDs both go through the same residencies. And so both practice in the exact same way. But what everybody said before is accurate. Like usually you won't see DOs in like a lot of the surgical specialties. There are some, but it's not as common. You'll see a lot of DOs in primary care. And so I think that's just kind of been the historical trend. So, but in all practice, like in practicality, there's not really any difference. Just depends a little bit on like the philosophy of the teaching, but it's essentially the same curriculum.
Another point I would say, if like you're given the chance, if you have a DO acceptance and an MD acceptance, weigh the location of the school, weigh that as a factor, how much it's cost, what's the difference between the schools, and look into the types of residencies that that school has, because there might be a different subspecialty of medicine that you could experience with going through a DO school as opposed to an MD school. They're just different options. So look into those.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Next question is, do you work with other professional programs at your schools? So like maybe nursing, public health, etc.
Yeah, so at our campus, we have nursing, nurse practitioner, pharmacy, social work, PT. I'm missing some, but yeah, and I'm an RMed, so I'm in like the rural. It's like basically an extra like class I have to take, and we work a lot with like other rural like specialties too. So there's a lot of like interprofessional working, which is nice.
All the hospitals that we rotate in have all the like a bunch of nursing students, speech language pathologists, therapy students. They all rotate also with us. So, and even like dental students too sometimes.
As you say, our school as just an M1, we don't have much like in the way of the way that SIU is structured. The first year is it's more like a 5th year of college, and then you do a lot more clinical stuff the second year. But I'm sure it'll get different as you go, and you'll get plenty of experience working with different professionals just as you go through like rotations and stuff as well. So.
Okay, great. So next question was, how many schools did you all apply to or get accepted into? This person would like to stay around the St. Louis area, but there aren't too many options. How tricky was it to get in if you applied to schools in this area?
That really depends on a lot of stuff. Like I only applied to 9. That's on the lower end of what people normally apply to. I think the average is like in the upper teens, like 17, 18. But if you want to stay in a specific area, obviously that's going to limit the amount of schools you apply to, which theoretically will limit the amount of acceptances you can get. So it's kind of just a balance. Like the more you apply to, the better chances at interviews, potentially better chances at acceptances. But definitely don't be afraid to not apply to too many. Just be smart with which ones you pick and be sure in what you're doing.
Yeah, I actually only fully applied to 3 schools. A lot of I wanted to stay around this area. I was trying to go the cheaper route, so I wasn't trying to spend a lot of money in applications too, because that can really rack up the money there. Do a lot of research on the schools you're applying to, because I know a lot of people apply to a school that they're never going to get into, and not because they're a bad student or whatever. It's just, for example, UMKC, or like UMKC is, if you're not from Missouri, you most likely are not going to get there. They only accept like 20 medical students per class because they have like a 6-year program within their school that they already have going. So they only accept 20 every year. And I think the percentage of out of state is like 0.01% or something like that. So unless you have really good ties to the school or, you know, that area, that's just something you wouldn't want to apply to because that's just going to be, you know, a no, or like extra waste of time and money for you. SLU, I know if you're not in their direct admit program, which none of you are, if you go to SIUE, I think you have to have at least a 510 before they interview you. And I only know that because I worked as a scribe in the ER, and one of the admissions doctors told me that if you don't have a 510, they don't even interview you. So just be really smart with how you apply, because I mean, I only applied to 3 and I got into SIUE. I got waitlisted at UMKC, which was a shocker. I did have technically some ties to Kansas City, so that's why I applied there. But yeah, so I was waitlisted 1, accepted at 1, and then denied at 1. So yeah, it just be smart with what you're doing and what you want to do, like everyone was saying.
I was way too neurotic and applied to 20, which was completely unnecessary. But I have Andrew to blame for that because he was helping me out. But honestly, I made some stupid decisions, and like I applied to University of Kentucky. They don't even take people that aren't like Kentucky residents. So I just like, you need make sure you're looking places up, because I made that mistake on some schools, and like I got into SIU, which is where I wanted to go, and then I withdrew from a bunch of places, which is just wasted money because secondaries can cost like $100 per school. And so like consider each school that you apply to like potentially like $130, because it's going to cost $30 to send a primary and then another $100 for a secondary. And so, you know, you want to apply to a good amount of schools to increase your chances of an interview and then an acceptance, but you also want to play it smart and don't apply to schools like I did that literally just won't accept you because of the location that, you know, you were born in. So definitely a lot of factors to keep in mind.
I'll second what like everybody else has said. Noah threw me under the bus there. I applied to 20 schools because I'm poor and it was free. So that leads me into point number 1. If your family makes under a certain amount per year, divided amongst your children or whatever, you can get application assistance, and they make that makes all of your primaries free and like reduces the cost of a bunch of your secondary applications. Yeah, good. I think Grant just put that in there. But yeah, that, and then also like they're saying like do your research on like what schools like are going to take you. I was like I was just applying to ones in like a 6-hour radius, and I accidentally applied to an HBCU, which was interesting. But I don't know. I think it's worth your time to do your like research. So
Yeah, I just have a little bit. So Jackson and I went through applying together because obviously we wanted to go to the same school. He's from Wisconsin. I'm from Illinois. He got interviews only at Wisconsin schools. I got interviews only at Illinois because in-state is like a really huge factor for a lot of those state schools. So I think I probably like sent primaries to maybe like 15 and secondaries to only like 6 or 7. And then I was like, why did I pay to send my primary there if I know I'm not going to go there? So definitely do your research. Definitely get MSAR. Yeah, MSAR was really nice. We actually split that with like a few of our friends. I think it was like, yeah, so Kayla said around like $30. We just all like shared the same username and passcode and split the cost. And I think it's good for like a year. So I thought that was really helpful because you can see percentage of in-state and out of state and MCAT and kind of see your chances on if you could get in there or not.
Awesome. So next question was, what did your extracurriculars look like for getting into med school? So maybe you could talk about Pre-Health Hub if you were in it while you were applying.
I don't think Pre-Health Club existed in my class, maybe with Noah's class, I believe. But I did a lot of things. Don't be like me and do everything under the sun. I was really burnt out by the end of it, but I was an SI PLTL leader. Those I think are just important because you're reviewing the material constantly. It helps with the MCAT. You also get paid, which is nice. I also was a scribe. I did the medical assistant over my gap year. And then I was in a sorority. I don't think that necessarily hurts or helps your application. I was technically a founding member when Kappa Kappa Gamma came onto campus, so that technically looks a little bit better than just joining like a sorority, but obviously you're not all going to get that chance if there's no founding sorority coming into play. But I think that's it in terms of at school what I did. So, and I know a lot of people were SI. I think almost everyone on the panel was SI or PLTL, so that definitely helped.
Yeah, I think it's important to, when you put an experience or activity on your application, make sure you really know about that experience. A lot of people like to put things on their application just to check a box, but they really know nothing about what they did. For example, and I had a shadowing experience, and in one of my interviews, I was asked to talk a lot about that shadowing experience, asked to talk about specific cases that I saw on that specific day, how like the doctors and other staff reacted to like a situation. And if I was making like up hours, I would have had like no idea what to even say about that. So make sure you're putting stuff on your application that actually meant something to you, is like imperative to your application.
And they will, like, I would agree with that. It's probably better to have fewer like things that you can actually talk about and are passionate about. Because they usually, like I noticed in my interviews, that they would you like star like experiences as like the most like impactful, and they'll usually end up asking you more about those. And just like padding your application, the risk reward on that is like not very good, because like there's a pretty good chance that they'll ask you and it's not like worth getting caught. So being able to talk about what you did and like how it like changed you or helped you grow is probably one of the more important things that you can do.
Also, med schools like to know that you are a human and do things for fun. So it's worth putting your hobbies on there. That's what I did. And I talked with my interviewer about bike rides and like what we do, like what trails we go on and whatnot around the area, for like 10 minutes. And so that's like 10 minutes of like really casual conversation where you're not like scared because you're in a med school interview. So that's something worth putting on your application as well. And they might even ask about that in secondaries, which are a whole other set of essays too.
I also totally forgot to add volunteer hours. The alternative spring break is a really great thing. I did it for 3 years straight. I was actually part of the HSA board that got the specific honors program spring break trip going. But it's honestly not that expensive. I think the one through just SIU E in general, there's 3 different ones that they do. There's one that's really local, there's one that's out of state, and then there's one that's out of the country, I believe. So my sophomore year, I went to Roanoke, Virginia, and all we did was we took this house and we flipped it, and then we sold it to the community for way under what it's worth, for people like below the poverty line. And that just shows your interviewers, one, that you're willing to take time out of your day just to help the community. And in general, volunteer hours look good no matter what you're volunteering in, as long as, yeah, like Noah was saying earlier, as long as you can like be passionate about it and speak about it, they're going to notice that when you apply. And I think that's a really important factor too, is being passionate about what you're writing.
Yeah, so I've been on the interview board for like a year and a half now. So I would say, like, everyone has research, everyone has like, clinical experience and all this stuff, but really put those things, even though they might seem weird, that really make you unique and that you can talk about, like Kayla said, whether you do a cool trip like that or whether you have really interesting hobbies. Like that's what, especially in COVID, when like people couldn't get out and like volunteer or like do clinical experience, like the unique things that kind of make you and are really good talking points are what like interviewers are looking for. They want, something substantial and not just like the same med student or pre-med, that, everyone does research and everyone has good grades and all that stuff. So definitely put those things that are kind of weird or you think is weird or unique, but you can talk about them a lot. Like Noah said, you really want to like put stuff on there you're passionate about and you can talk about, and they definitely make the interview flow a lot more easier if you're comfortable talking about what you put on your application and what you put on your application instead of just kind of trying to fill the boxes.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll do one more question since we're hitting that time. Um, were there any classes you took in your undergrad that have helped you in med school or have helped you with like the MCAT?
I think
I-
cell and
I was just-
biology worked pretty well.
I was just gonna say cell is like probably the single most useful thing that like I've come across so far as an M1. It's all cell. Like everything you do to a certain degree is like molecular signaling and stuff. So that one, having a good understanding of that going in has paid like dividends.
I hate cell, so that was I did not like that class. It was the one class that I absolutely did not like. Human functional anatomy. With Dr. Cohn is usually who teaches it, I believe. That was a phenomenal class to take because, I mean, it's a really hard class, don't get me wrong, and being in the lab is really hard, but we have a whole test section of just anatomy in the cadaver lab. And so having previous experience, I mean, it's not a real cadaver. I think we used cats, and it was during COVID when I was ended up taking that. So half the time we had cats and then it was all online.
Yeah.
But that's really, really helpful is having an anatomy background because it makes everything easier, even the lectures, because the lectures go back to anatomy every time. So that's really useful too.
So I thought the most helpful for me was biochem, physiology, and micro. Well, and it also depends on who you have as a teacher, because I had Dr. Williams for physiology and he was hard, but he was so good. And I took that right before I started med school, I think. So I remembered a lot of that stuff. So definitely, if you have an option to take maybe a harder professor, but you know, you're going to learn more, definitely go more towards that route.
Well, and another, just like one last, I mean, also like on top of that, pay attention. I did not pay attention very well in physiology. I'd gotten acceptance and it was like the end of COVID and stuff. And I would have taken so much more from that. And it's so easy to just like check out once you've got your acceptance. But it's just a good habit in general. You're like paying money to take the class. So like you may as well get something from it.
Also, it's a little too late for everyone here now unless you're a freshman, but I feel like specifically for our schools, like curriculum, I can't speak on others, but people who did biochem majors, they're rocking it out right now. They seem to have a little easier time just because they're more familiar and it's not pulling completely brand new information for them. I think anyone who takes like all the harder extracurriculars, they seem to have kind of the upper hand too. So yeah, I know it sucks we're telling you to take the harder ones, but it is useful. It does help. It makes you familiar with the material. And even just being familiar is a lot better than not knowing it at all and just going into it. So.
Okay, cool. So it's 8:30 now, so thank you so much, guys, for speaking with us. If you guys are comfortable with it, I'm gonna send out like emails. I know some of you have already put that in the chat, so I can send that out, and this recording will be available. And oh, Claire wanted to ask a really quick question of what your guys' majors were in undergrad, but then, yeah, cool. I figured bio probably. Awesome.
I think everybody did bio.
Exercise science, you didn't know that. Okay.
Oh yeah, Grant was the exercise dude. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate you talking to us again. I know, like, I think all of you were here last year, so thank you.
Do we want to get a photo? Like
Justin,
last
do you
year?
want to take a photo?
A screenshot, rather.
Since he's so good at it.
I think Justin might have said he had to leave. I thought I saw that in the chat earlier. You guys might want to double check me, but
He came back, it's okay. But yeah. I got a picture. We're good.
Well, I was not ready.
Okay, I'll take another.
When was the picture taken?
Just now. Okay, everyone ready? I'm gonna take it. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I got it.
Much better.
Okay, thank you guys for coming. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Jake, are you here
Hi,
on
Justin.
2 accounts right now?
Oh, yeah, my laptop sucks, so I don't have audio. So I'm using my phone. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, hope all is going well with everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, good to see everybody too.
Yeah, for sure.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Justin.